Listen, I know what you're thinking. Oh great, another humans or space orc story where we're the terrifying apex predators of the galaxy. And you know what? You're absolutely right. But here's the thing. Sometimes the classics work for a reason. And sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. Sometimes it's also way more entertaining. This particular tale of human excellence, and I use that term with all the loving sarcasm it deserves, takes place on Kepler Station, a delightfully diverse trading hub orbiting the gas giant Kepler 442b. Picture, if you will, the most stereotypical space cantina you can imagine, then multiply it by about 50, and add really uncomfortable seating. That's Kepler Station's main promenade, a sprawling marketplace where every species in the known galaxy comes to trade, argue, and occasionally get into fights that require hazmat cleanup crews. The station itself is a marvel of engineering, assuming you define marvel as a structure that probably shouldn't exist but somehow does anyway. It's one of those places where the artificial gravity works perfectly in the central hub, but gets increasingly wonky the further out you go, leading to some truly spectacular pratfalls in the outer rings. The architects, a collective of overly enthusiastic Zentorians, had apparently designed it after consuming what humans would generously call the good stuff. But I digress. This story isn't about architecture, questionable or otherwise. It's about apex predators, misunderstandings, and why you should never, ever assume that just because something looks harmless, it actually is. Detective Riley Connor was having what he generously termed a day. It had started at 0600 station time when his alarm clock, a piece of Earth tech that somehow managed to be both incredibly reliable and incredibly annoying, had failed to account for the fact that Kepler Station ran on a 28-hour cycle. This meant he'd been operating on about 4 hours of sleep, which for a human might be manageable, but for a human trying to investigate a series of bizarre disappearances on an alien space station, less than ideal. Riley was what you might call a fish out of water, if fish were bipedal primates and water was the cold vacuum of space. He'd been assigned to Kepler Station 6 months ago as part of the Terran Federation's cultural exchange program, which was bureaucrat speak for, "We need someone to keep an eye on things and make sure nobody starts another interstellar incident." The previous human representative had been transferred after what the official reports called a misunderstanding regarding local customs, and what Riley privately suspected was someone got drunk and insulted an ambassador's mating display. The detective stood at roughly 6 feet tall, which made him average by human standards but apparently giant by most everyone else's. His dark hair was perpetually disheveled, a side effect of running his hands through it whenever the universe decided to be particularly obtuse, which was roughly every 15 minutes. His eyes, unremarkable brown, had developed what his ex-partner back on Earth had called the look, that particular expression worn by people who'd seen too much weirdness to be surprised by anything anymore. Today's weirdness had started with a report from the Trilaxian sector about another vanishing, which brought the total missing persons count to 7 over the past month. 7 beings from 7 different species, all of whom had simply disappeared. No bodies, no blood, no witnesses, no security footage that showed anything useful. Just there one moment, gone the next. Riley had been investigating these disappearances for 3 weeks now, and he was starting to suspect that whoever was responsible had a sense of humor about it. Each victim had been taken from a different sector of the station, but always from areas with convenient security blind spots. It was almost like someone was playing a game, and Riley was starting to get the uncomfortable feeling that he was the unwitting opponent. He stood now in the main promenade, watching the usual chaos unfold around him. The promenade was a sight to behold, a kilometer-long stretch of shops, restaurants, and services that catered to every species in the galaxy. The air recycling system worked overtime to manage the various atmospheric requirements of different species, leading to occasional pockets of what humans might charitably call exotic scents. To his left, a group of Vorthak merchants were engaged in what appeared to be either a heated negotiation or a ritual combat dance. With the Vorthak, it was often difficult to tell the difference. Their chitinous exoskeletons gleamed under the artificial lighting as they gesticulated wildly with their 4 arms, producing a sound like angry crickets with speech impediments. To his right, a family of Nerthians browsed the electronics stall. The Nerthians were one of the more pleasant species to encounter, roughly humanoid but with soft, downy fur that changed color based on their emotional state. Currently, they were a soothing blue-green, which meant they were either content or mildly nauseous. Riley had never been entirely sure which. Further down the promenade, he could see the hulking form of a Krillian enforcer making his rounds. The Krillians were the station's primary security force, and they looked the part. 8 feet tall, heavily muscled, and possessed of an unfortunate tendency to settle disputes by picking up whoever was causing trouble and shaking them until they stopped. They were effective, Riley had to admit, but their methods lacked a certain finesse. Still no luck with the disappearances, Detective? Riley turned to find Zizarth approaching, the station's chief administrator, and one of the few beings Riley had encountered who seemed to genuinely enjoy his job. Zizarth was a Meridian, which meant he looked like what would happen if you took a human, stretched them out by about a foot, gave them silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light, and replaced their eyes with large, multifaceted orbs that reminded Riley uncomfortably of disco balls. Define luck, Riley replied, accepting the steaming cup of what passed for coffee in this part of the galaxy. It tasted like burnt rubber with hints of regret, but it had caffeine, and that was what mattered. I've ruled out about 1,000 different possibilities, but I'm still not any closer to figuring out what's actually happening. Zizarth's head tilted, and what Riley had learned was the Meridian equivalent of a nod. The families are becoming concerned. There's talk of hiring private security, or worse, leaving the station entirely. Riley winced. Kepler Station's economy depended on being seen as a safe haven for traders and travelers. If word got out that beings were disappearing without explanation, it wouldn't take long for the traffic to dry up. And if the traffic dried up, the station would become another piece of expensive space debris. I'll find whoever's doing this, Riley said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it himself. It's just a matter of time. I hope so, Detective. For all our sakes. After Zizarth left, Riley found himself back to his favorite investigative technique, standing around and hoping something interesting would happen. It wasn't the most scientific approach, but it had served him well over the years. Sometimes the best way to solve a puzzle was to step back and let the pieces arrange themselves. He was halfway through his terrible coffee when he noticed it, a ripple in the crowd. Not literally, of course. The crowd continued to flow around the promenade as it always did, a river of different species going about their business. But there was something off, a subtle change in the pattern, like a stone dropped in still water. Riley's instincts, honed by 15 years of police work, began to tingle. Something was happening. Something was about to happen. He couldn't say what exactly, but he'd learned to trust that feeling. It had saved his life more times than he cared to count. He began moving through the crowd, not toward anything in particular, just following the feeling. Around him, the usual sounds of the promenade continued. The multilingual chatter of dozens of species, the hum of environmental systems, the occasional outburst when someone's universal translator glitched and turned a polite request into a mortal insult. Then he saw it. At first glance, it looked like just another being in the crowd. About Riley's height, bipedal, wearing a hooded cloak that obscured most of its features. Nothing unusual there. Plenty of species preferred to keep their features hidden, either for cultural reasons or because they were simply having a bad scales day. But Riley had spent enough time around non-humans to notice the details. The way it moved wasn't quite right. Too fluid, too predatory. Its head turned with mechanical precision, scanning the crowd with an intensity that made Riley's skin crawl. And there was something about its posture, coiled, ready to strike. Riley began to follow at a distance, keeping to the edges of the crowd where the shadows were deeper. The cloaked figure continued its methodical scan of the promenade, and Riley realized with growing unease that it wasn't looking for something. It was looking for someone. The figure paused near a cluster of Yithian traders, their crystalline forms refracting the artificial light into rainbow patterns. For a moment, Riley thought this might be it, the moment when the mystery would finally reveal itself. But then the figure's head turned slightly, and Riley caught a glimpse of what lay beneath the hood. He'd seen a lot of strange things in his time on Kepler Station, but this was something else entirely. The face, if it could be called that, was a writhing mass of tentacles surrounding what appeared to be a circular mouth, filled with row upon row of needle-sharp teeth. The eyes, all 6 of them, were the color of old blood and seemed to glow with their own inner light. Riley had to admit it was a face that could stop a clock, or start a nightmare. The creature, because there was no other word for it, continued its scan of the crowd, and Riley began to understand what he was looking at. This wasn't some lost tourist or confused visitor. This was a predator, and it was hunting. As if to confirm his suspicions, the creature's attention fixed on a young Altarian who had separated from her group to examine a jewelry stall. The Altarians were a peaceful species, roughly humanoid but with delicate features and skin that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. They were also, Riley realized with growing alarm, about the same size as the previous missing persons. The creature began to move toward the Altarian, its movements becoming more purposeful. Riley found himself faced with a choice. He could continue to observe and hope to gather more information, or he could act now and potentially save a life. It wasn't really a choice at all. "Excuse me," Riley called out, stepping into the creature's path. "Are you lost? You seem to be looking for something." The creature froze, its multiple eyes fixing on Riley with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Up close, he could see that the tentacles around its mouth were constantly moving, as if tasting the air. The smell that emanated from it was unpleasant, like rotting meat mixed with ozone. "I am not lost," the creature said, its voice a wet, sliding sound that made Riley's teeth itch. "I am hunting." Well, Riley thought, at least it was honest. Hunting for what? He asked, though he was pretty sure he already knew the answer. The creature's head tilted, studying Riley with what might have been curiosity. "Food," it said simply. "I hunt for food." Riley glanced around the promenade, noting the various species going about their business, blissfully unaware of the conversation taking place. "Well, there are plenty of restaurants around here. I'm sure you can find something to your taste." The creature's tentacles writhed more rapidly, and Riley caught a glimpse of that circular mouth opening and closing. "I prefer live prey." And there it was. The missing persons weren't missing. They were meals. Riley felt his hand drift toward the plasma pistol holstered at his hip, a movement that didn't go unnoticed by the creature. Its eyes tracked the motion, and for a moment, the two of them stood in a tense standoff in the middle of the bustling promenade. "You are different," the creature said, its voice taking on a note of curiosity. "Not like the others." "I get that a lot," Riley replied, keeping his voice casual despite the fact that he was apparently having a conversation with a serial killer. "I'm human. We're kind of new around here." The creature's eyes widened, and Riley was surprised to see what looked like recognition flash across its alien features. "Human," it repeated, as if the word had some special significance. "Yeah, that's right. Is that a problem?" The creature took a step backward, its predatory posture suddenly becoming more defensive. "You are human," it said again, and this time there was something else in its voice. Something that sounded suspiciously like fear. Riley blinked. "I'm sorry, is that supposed to mean something to me?" The creature's tentacles had stopped writhing and were now pressed flat against its face, as if trying to hide. I was not aware that humans frequented this station." "Well, I'm here on official business," Riley said, deciding to play along. "Investigating some disappearances. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The creature's multiple eyes darted around the promenade, as if looking for an escape route. I think perhaps I should leave now." "Oh, I don't think so," Riley said, his hand now resting openly on his weapon. "I think you and I need to have a longer conversation, somewhere more private." The creature backed away another step, its movements now decidedly less predatory and more, well, prey-like. "Please," it said, and Riley was surprised to hear genuine pleading in its voice. "I did not know. I was not informed that humans were present on this station." Riley felt like he was missing something important. "Okay, I'll bite. What exactly is it about humans that has you so worked up?" The creature's eyes fixed on him with an intensity that was almost painful. "You are human," it said, as if that explained everything. "You are the apex predators of your world. You are the species that conquered your entire planet and then reached for the stars. You are the beings that other species tell stories about to frighten their young." Riley stared at the creature, trying to process what he was hearing. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your species," the creature continued, its voice taking on the tone of someone reciting a particularly frightening bedtime story. "Evolved from pursuit predators. You do not have claws or fangs or natural weapons. Instead, you simply follow. You track your prey across vast distances, wearing them down through sheer persistence until they collapse from exhaustion. Then you consume them." "That's actually not entirely wrong," Riley admitted, though he'd never thought of it in quite those terms before. "Your species," the creature pressed on, "survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions and asteroid impacts. You spread across your world's harshest environments and thrived. You domesticated other predators and turned them into companions. You built weapons that could kill from vast distances. You created tools that could destroy entire cities." Riley was starting to get the picture. "And you've heard all this from other species?" "The story spread," the creature said, its voice barely above a whisper. "The tales of the humans who came from the third planet of a yellow star. The species that looked harmless but could kill with their bare hands. The beings who smiled before they struck." "Okay, first of all," Riley said, "that's a pretty dramatic way to describe it. Second of all, most of us are actually pretty friendly once you get to know us." The creature's tentacles began to writhe again, but this time it seemed more like anxiety than aggression. "I have heard the stories. How humans will track their prey for days, weeks, months. How they never give up. How they study their targets, learn their weaknesses, and then strike when they are most vulnerable." Riley thought about this for a moment. You know, when you put it like that, it does sound pretty ominous. But mostly we just use those skills for things like detective work and marathon running. Detective work? The creature's eyes focused on Riley with renewed intensity. You are a hunter of criminals? A tracker of lawbreakers? Well, yeah, that's my job. The creature made a sound that might have been a whimper. I am sorry, it said. I am so very sorry. I was not aware. I will leave immediately. I will never return to this station. Riley held up a hand. Hold on there, sport. You can't just apologize for serial murder and expect to walk away. That's not how this works. But I am not equipped to face a human hunter, the creature protested. My species are ambush predators. We rely on surprise and overwhelming force. Against a human, against a persistence predator. It trailed off, apparently too horrified to continue. Riley had to admit, this was probably the weirdest confession he'd ever received. Look, I appreciate the compliment, really, but you still killed 7 people. That's not something you can just say sorry for. The creature's posture shifted again, and Riley saw something he hadn't expected. Resignation. You are correct, it said. I have violated the laws of this station. I have taken lives. I will surrender myself to your judgment. Just like that? What choice do I have? The creature asked. You are human. You will hunt me regardless. Better to surrender now than to be slowly worn down over time. Riley stared at the creature, trying to wrap his head around what was happening. Apparently, humanity's reputation in the galaxy was significantly more terrifying than he'd realized. And apparently that reputation was so well established that serial killers were willing to surrender rather than face human justice. Okay, he said finally. This is definitely not how I expected this conversation to go. The creature extended what might have been its equivalent of hands. I am ready to be restrained. Riley looked around the promenade, where the usual chaos continued unabated. No one seemed to have noticed their conversation, which was probably for the best. He activated his communicator and called for backup, then looked back at the creature. Can I ask you something? Yes. How exactly did these stories about humans get started? I mean, we've only been part of the galactic community for about 10 years. The creature's tentacles twitched. The stories began almost immediately after first contact. Your species' history was studied, analyzed. The information spread through diplomatic channels, then through trade networks, then through the general population. And everyone just assumed we were all terrifying killers? Not killers, the creature corrected. Hunters. There is a difference. Killers destroy for pleasure or anger. Hunters are far more dangerous. They are patient. They are methodical. They never give up. Riley thought about his ex-partner's comment about the look, and wondered if maybe there was more truth to humanity's reputation than he'd realized. The backup arrived in the form of 2 Krillian enforcers, who seemed somewhat perplexed by the situation. One of them, Riley had learned to tell them apart by their distinctive scarring patterns, approached with the careful gait of someone who'd dealt with humans before. Detective Connor, the enforcer said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from somewhere around his ankles. We received your call. This is the perpetrator? This is the perpetrator, Riley confirmed. Fair warning. He's confessed to all 7 disappearances, and he's been cooperative. The enforcer looked at the creature, who was still maintaining its submissive posture. Cooperative? Apparently humans have a certain reputation in the galaxy, Riley said. Word gets around. The enforcer's eyes, small, black, and surprisingly intelligent, fixed on Riley. Ah, he said. That. You know about this? Detective Connor, the enforcer said. Did you not receive the briefing packets when you arrived on station? Riley thought back to his arrival 6 months ago, when he'd been handed approximately 17 different data pads containing what he'd assumed was mostly bureaucratic nonsense. I may have skimmed some of them. One of those packets, the enforcer continued, contained a summary of humanity's reputation among the various species in the galaxy. It was thought that you should be aware of how others perceive your kind. And how exactly do others perceive my kind? The enforcer paused, as if considering how to phrase his answer diplomatically. With respect, he said finally, and a considerable amount of caution. Riley looked around the promenade again, this time seeing it through different eyes. The way some of the smaller species gave him a wide berth when he passed. The way conversations sometimes stopped when he approached. The way his requests for information were usually answered quickly and thoroughly. He'd assumed it was just professional courtesy. So let me get this straight, Riley said. Everyone on this station thinks humans are terrifying apex predators. Not everyone, the enforcer replied. But many. Your species has a very distinctive reputation. The creature, who had been listening to this conversation with obvious interest, spoke up. Detective Connor, may I ask you something? Sure. Are you going to hunt me? Riley looked at the creature, then at the enforcer, then back at the creature. I'm going to investigate your crimes, build a case against you, and present that case to the appropriate authorities. That's my job. But you will not pursue me? Track me? Wear me down over time? Well, I mean, if you escape, then yeah, I'll have to track you down. But that's just standard procedure. The creature made that whimpering sound again. I will not escape. I will cooperate fully with your investigation. Good to know, Riley said, then turned to the enforcer. I think we're done here. Can you take him into custody? As the enforcers led the creature away, Riley found himself standing alone in the promenade, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of about 20 minutes, he'd solved a case that had been puzzling him for weeks, learned that his species had a galaxy-wide reputation as unstoppable killing machines, and apparently intimidated a serial killer into surrendering without firing a shot. All in all, it had been a pretty good day. The debriefing took place in Zexarth's office, a circular room near the top of the station's central hub that offered a spectacular view of the gas giant below. Riley sat in what passed for a chair. The station's furniture was designed to accommodate a variety of anatomies, which meant it wasn't particularly comfortable for any of them, and sipped another cup of terrible coffee while Zexarth reviewed the case files. So, Zareth said, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the light from his desk display. The perpetrator simply surrendered? That's right, Riley confirmed. Soon as he found out I was human, he basically gave up. Said he wasn't equipped to face a persistence predator, whatever that means. Zexarth's head tilted in that way that Riley had learned meant he was processing information. Detective Connor, have you given any thought to why you were assigned to this station? Cultural exchange program, Riley said automatically. Building bridges between species, fostering understanding, that sort of thing. That is partially correct, Zexarth admitted. But there were other considerations. Riley felt a familiar tingle of suspicion. Such as? Kepler Station is a trading hub, Zexarth explained. We host representatives from dozens of species, many of whom have conflicting interests. There are territorial disputes, trade disagreements, old grudges carried over from pre-contact civilizations. Sometimes these conflicts escalate, and you needed someone to keep the peace? We needed someone whose mere presence would keep the peace, Zarth corrected. Someone whose reputation would make others think twice before starting trouble. Riley stared at the administrator. You're telling me I was assigned here because other species are afraid of humans? Not afraid, Zexarth said diplomatically. Cautious. Respectful. Aware of humanity's capabilities. What capabilities? Riley asked, though he was starting to suspect he knew the answer. Zexarth activated his desk display, and Riley found himself looking at what appeared to be a documentary about Earth. Specifically about human history. The narrator was speaking in what sounded like Meridian, but the universal translator was helpfully converting it to English. The human species, the narrator was saying, represents one of the most successful predator lineages in known galactic history. Despite lacking natural weapons, they achieved dominance over their home planet through superior intelligence, adaptability, and an almost supernatural persistence in pursuit of their goals. The display showed images of early human hunters tracking prey across vast distances, of human settlements spreading across every continent on Earth, of human technology advancing at an unprecedented rate. Unlike most predator species, the narrator continued, humans do not rely on ambush tactics or overwhelming physical force. Instead, they employ what xenobiologists term persistence predation, the ability to track and pursue prey over extended periods until the target is exhausted. Riley watched, fascinated despite himself, as the display showed examples of human endurance, marathon runners, Arctic explorers, deep-sea divers, astronauts. This persistence extends beyond hunting, the narrator explained. Humans have been observed to pursue goals for decades, even centuries. They will attempt seemingly impossible tasks repeatedly until they succeed. They have been known to hold grudges for generations. Okay, Riley said. That's actually pretty accurate. But it makes us sound like some kind of space bogeyman. The documentary was produced by the Galactic Anthropological Society, Zexarth explained. It is considered one of the most comprehensive studies of human behavior available. It has been widely distributed throughout the galaxy, and everyone who watches it thinks humans are terrifying. Not terrifying, Zexarth corrected. Formidable. There is a difference. Riley thought about this. So when other species look at me, They don't see a guy who can't figure out how to work the coffee machine in his quarters. They see some kind of unstoppable killing machine. They see a representative of a species that survived multiple extinction events, colonized every biome on their home planet, and achieved interstellar travel in less than a century after discovering powered flight, Zarth said. They see a member of a species that has never been conquered, never been enslaved, never been driven to extinction by predators or disease or natural disaster. We came pretty close a few times, Riley pointed out. But you survived, Zarth said simply. You always survive. That is what makes you notable. Riley finished his coffee and stared out at the gas giant below. So the reason I was able to solve this case so quickly wasn't because I'm particularly clever or skilled. It was because the perpetrator was so scared of humans that he gave up rather than face me. Your investigative skills are considerable, Zarth assured him. But yes, your species' reputation was helpful in this instance. Great, Riley said. So I'm basically a living threat display. You are a peacekeeper, Zarth corrected. Your presence here has prevented more conflicts than you realize. Trade disputes that might have escalated into violence have been settled peacefully. Territorial arguments that might have led to war have been resolved through negotiation. All because the parties involved know that a human is watching. Riley had to admit it was an effective strategy. And everyone's okay with this arrangement? Everyone benefits, Zarth said. The station remains peaceful. Trade continues to flow, and you gain valuable experience in interspecies relations. It is what you might call a win-win situation, except for the part where I'm basically a scarecrow in a uniform. A very effective scarecrow, Zarth pointed out. Riley stood up, his joints protesting after sitting in the alien chair for too long. Well, I guess I should get back to work. Are there any other cases I should know about? Actually, Zarth said, there is one other matter. We have received reports of some unusual activity in the outer ring. Nothing serious, but it might be worth investigating. What kind of unusual activity? Illegal gambling, Zarth said. Specifically, combat sports involving non-sentient creatures. The Beltarian Syndicate is suspected of running the operation. Riley raised an eyebrow. And you want me to investigate because the Beltarian Syndicate has a reputation for being uncooperative with law enforcement, Zarth explained. They have been known to intimidate investigators, bribe officials, and, when necessary, resort to violence. But they probably won't try any of that with a human. The thought had occurred to me, Zarth admitted. Riley shook his head, but he was smiling. You know what? I'm starting to like this job. The outer ring was exactly what it sounded like. The outermost section of Kepler Station, where the artificial gravity was weakest and the rent was cheapest. It was where you went if you wanted to conduct business that wouldn't pass scrutiny in the more respectable parts of the station. The lighting was dimmer here, the air recycling less efficient, and the security cameras mysteriously prone to malfunctions. Riley made his way through the narrow corridors, following the directions Zarth had given him. The illegal gambling operation was supposedly located in a converted cargo bay near the station's outer hull, far from the main traffic areas where station security might notice anything unusual. He passed a variety of businesses that operated in the gray areas of galactic law, a pawn shop that asked no questions about the origin of its merchandise, a bar that served drinks strong enough to dissolve hull plating, and a clinic that advertised discreet medical services in 17 different languages. The outer ring was also home to a number of species that preferred to keep a low profile. Riley passed several groups of beings whose universal translators couldn't quite parse their language, and who seemed to melt into the shadows when they noticed him approaching. He found the converted cargo bay exactly where Zarth had said it would be, behind a door marked with symbols that probably meant something like authorized personnel only, in whatever language the Beltarian Syndicate preferred. The door was guarded by what appeared to be a heavily modified security droid, its optical sensors tracking Riley's movement with mechanical precision. This is a private establishment, the droid announced in a voice that sounded like gravel being fed into a blender. Please state your business. I'm here about the entertainment, Riley said, figuring that was vague enough to get him inside without immediately blowing his cover. The droid's sensors focused on him with increased intensity. Species designation? Human. There was a pause that lasted just long enough for Riley to wonder if the droid had malfunctioned. Then its optical sensors dimmed slightly, and the door behind it slid open. Please proceed, the droid said, its voice now considerably more respectful. Enjoy your visit. Riley stepped through the door and found himself in what had once been a cargo bay but was now a makeshift arena. The space was dominated by a circular pit about 20 meters across, surrounded by tiered seating that could accommodate maybe 200 spectators. The lighting was focused on the pit, leaving the seating area in relative darkness. At the moment, the pit was occupied by what appeared to be two large reptilian creatures circling each other warily. They were about the size of Earth tigers, but with armored hides and claws that looked like they could cut through hull plating. The crowd around the pit was cheering and making what Riley assumed were bets. "First time?" a voice asked beside him. Riley turned to see a being that looked like a cross between a spider and a used car salesman. It had 8 limbs, multiple eyes, and was wearing what appeared to be a very expensive suit tailored to accommodate its unusual anatomy. "Yeah," Riley said. "Friend of mine recommended this place." "Excellent choice," the being said, extending what might have been a hand. "I am Scrix, proprietor of this establishment. And you are?" "Riley," he said, shaking what turned out to be a surprisingly firm appendage. "Human." Scrix's multiple eyes widened slightly. "Ah, a human. How delightful. We don't get many of your species here. Please, allow me to show you to our VIP section." Before Riley could object, Scrix was leading him through the crowd toward a section of seating that was separated from the general population by what appeared to be a force field. The chairs here were more comfortable, the view was better, and there was even a server taking drink orders. "This really isn't necessary," Riley said, but Scrix was already gesturing for him to sit. "Nonsense," Scrix replied. "A human in my establishment is an honor. Please, sit. The next match is about to begin." Riley found himself in a plush seat with an excellent view of the pit, where the two reptilian creatures were still circling each other. Around him, the crowd was getting more excited, and he could hear the sounds of frantic betting. "What exactly are those things?" he asked, pointing to the creatures in the pit. "Calarian death lizards," Scrix said proudly. "Completely non-sentient, but extremely aggressive. They were bred for combat on their homeworld. Very popular with the betting crowd." One of the death lizards suddenly lunged at the other, and the crowd erupted as the two creatures engaged in what appeared to be a fight to the death. Riley watched, fascinated despite himself, as the battle unfolded with brutal efficiency. "Impressive, are they not?" Scrix said. "Of course, they are nothing compared to the creatures from your own world." Riley blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Earth creatures," Scrix explained. "We have heard the most incredible stories. Predators that hunt in packs, creatures that can crush bone with their jaws, beasts that can run faster than most vehicles." "You're talking about wolves and alligators and horses," Riley said. "They're not exactly exotic death machines." Scrix's eyes gleamed with what Riley was beginning to recognize as the universal expression of someone who'd found a captive audience. "Ah, but that is where you are wrong, my friend. We have studied your world's fauna extensively. Did you know that your planet is home to creatures that can survive in the vacuum of space?" "Tardigrades," Riley said automatically. "They're microscopic. And creatures that can regenerate lost limbs?" "Starfish. And they're pretty slow-moving." "What about the creatures that hunt by pack coordination, using complex strategies to bring down prey many times their size?" Riley was starting to see where this was going. "You mean like wolves?" "Yeah, they're impressive, but they're not exactly—" "Or," Scrix interrupted, his voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a punchline, "the apex predator that domesticated those pack hunters and turned them into loyal companions?" Riley paused. "You're talking about dogs." "I am talking about humans," Scrix said with obvious satisfaction. "The species that looked at nature's perfect killing machines and said, these would make excellent pets." In the pit below, one of the death lizards had finally gained the upper hand, and the crowd was going wild. Riley watched as the victor stood over its fallen opponent, but his mind was elsewhere, processing what Scrix had just said. "You know," Riley said slowly, "when you put it like that, it does sound kind of impressive." "Impressive?" Scrix laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "My friend, humans are the stuff of legend. You are the species that survived ice ages by making clothing from the hides of megafauna. You are the beings who looked at the ocean and said, I wonder what's on the other side, then built boats to find out. You are the creatures who saw birds flying and decided that you should be able to do that too." "Okay, I'm starting to get the picture," Riley said. "But surely other species have done impressive things too." "Oh, certainly," Scrix agreed. "But most species evolve to fill a specific ecological niche. They become very good at one thing. Humans became good at everything." "You are persistence predators, but you are also tool users, social coordinators, pattern recognition specialists, and environmental adapters. You are generalists in a galaxy full of specialists." The crowd was dispersing as the first match concluded, and Riley could see handlers removing the defeated death lizard from the pit. In the brief lull, he took the opportunity to study the operation more closely. The setup was professional, he had to admit. The arena was well maintained, the seating was comfortable, and the staff seemed to know what they were doing. But there were subtle signs that not everything was above board. The way certain areas were restricted, the fact that no recording devices were allowed, and the general atmosphere of people trying very hard not to draw attention to themselves. "So," Riley said casually, "how long have you been running this operation?" Scrix's demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "We have been providing entertainment services for several years now, all completely legal, of course." "Of course," Riley agreed. "I'm sure you have all the necessary permits and licenses." "Absolutely," Scrix said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely sure what permits and licenses might be required. "We are a legitimate business establishment." The next match was beginning, and Riley found himself watching two creatures that looked like armored bears with too many teeth trying to kill each other. The crowd was even more enthusiastic than before, and the betting was reaching fever pitch. "Popular sport," Riley observed. "Very popular," Scrix confirmed. "We have spectators from all over the galaxy. Some come for the excitement, others for the betting, and a few—" He paused, studying Riley with his multiple eyes. "A few come for other reasons." "Such as?" "Well," Scrix said, leaning closer, "we occasionally have special events. Private competitions. Very exclusive, very profitable." Riley's investigative instincts were practically vibrating. "What kind of private competitions?" Scrix glanced around nervously, then gestured for Riley to follow him. They moved away from the main seating area to a more secluded section of the converted cargo bay, where the noise from the crowd was muted. "Between you and me," Scrix said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "we sometimes arrange matches involving rarer specimens." "Rarer how?" "Well," Scrix said, "there are certain creatures that are difficult to obtain through legal channels. Creatures from restricted worlds, or species that are protected by various treaties." Riley felt a familiar chill. "Protected species?" "Nothing sentient, of course," Scrix said quickly. "We would never engage in anything that might harm intelligent life. But there are many non-sentient species that are considered protected for various bureaucratic reasons." "And you import these creatures illegally?" "We prefer to think of it as alternative procurement methods," Scrix said diplomatically. "The important thing is that our clients get to see truly spectacular entertainment." Riley was starting to get a clearer picture of the operation. It wasn't just illegal gambling, it was wildlife trafficking, probably on a significant scale. The kind of operation that could fund serious criminal enterprises. "These special events," Riley said, "how often do they happen?" "Perhaps once or twice a month," Scrix replied, "when we can obtain suitable specimens. In fact, we have one scheduled for tomorrow night. Very exclusive, very expensive." "And what makes it so special?" Scrix's eyes gleamed with obvious excitement. "We have managed to acquire a genuine Earth predator." Riley felt his blood run cold. "A what?" "A creature from your own homeworld," Scrix explained. "It took considerable effort and expense to obtain, but we believe it will provide unparalleled entertainment value." "What kind of creature?" "A apex predator," Scrix said proudly. "One of the most feared hunters on your planet. Our clients are extremely excited to see it in action." Riley's mind raced through the possibilities. Earth had been very strict about what biological samples were allowed off-planet, but there was always a black market for exotic specimens. Someone had managed to smuggle a dangerous predator off Earth, and now it was going to be used as entertainment in an illegal fighting ring. That's incredible," Riley said, hoping his voice sounded more excited than horrified. "What kind of predator?" "Ah," Scrix said, "that would be telling. But I will say this, it is a creature that even humans fear." Riley tried to think of Earth predators that might fit that description. Great white sharks? Saltwater crocodiles? Grizzly bears? Whatever it was probably scared, confused, and extremely dangerous. "I don't suppose I could get an invitation to this special event?" Riley asked. Scrix studied him for a long moment. "It is very exclusive," he said finally, "and very expensive." "Money's not a problem," Riley lied. "And it would require discretion, the kind of discretion that humans are known for." Riley wasn't sure what that meant, but he nodded anyway. "Absolutely. Very well," Scrix said. "I will arrange for an invitation. But I must warn you, tomorrow night's event will be intense, even for a human." "I can handle it," Riley said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. As they returned to the main seating area, Riley found himself facing a dilemma. He had enough evidence to shut down the illegal gambling operation, but if he acted now, he might miss the chance to rescue whatever Earth creature they had captured. On the other hand, if he waited until tomorrow night, he might be too late to prevent whatever they were planning. The match in the pit was reaching its conclusion, and the crowd was on its feet, cheering and shouting. Riley watched as one of the armored bear things finally gained the upper hand, and he couldn't help but think about the Earth predator that would be fighting in this same pit tomorrow night. "Magnificent, is it not?" Scrix said, gesturing to the victorious creature. "The raw power, the primal savagery. This is what true entertainment looks like." Riley nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He was already formulating a plan for tomorrow night, one that would hopefully shut down the operation and rescue whatever poor creature they had captured. It was going to be dangerous, and it was going to require some help. But first, he had to get through the rest of tonight without blowing his cover. The next morning found Riley in Zexarth's office again, this time with a much more complex situation to explain. The administrator listened patiently as Riley described the illegal gambling operation, the wildlife trafficking, and the upcoming special event featuring an Earth predator. "This is quite serious," Zareth said when Riley finished. "Wildlife trafficking is a major offense under galactic law. And if they have managed to obtain an Earth predator, it gets worse," Riley said. "I think they're planning to use it in a fight to the death. Whatever creature they have, it's probably terrified and confused. And if it's hurt or killed, it could create a serious diplomatic incident," Zareth finished. "Earth takes a very dim view of harm to its native species." Riley nodded. "I need to shut this down tonight, but I'm going to need help. The operation is too big for me to handle alone." "What kind of help?" "Security backup for starters. And I'll need someone who knows about animal handling in case the creature is injured or traumatized." Zexareth's head tilted in thought. "I can arrange for a security team. As for animal handling, there is a veterinary specialist on station. Dr. Vex High. She has experience with a variety of species." "Can she handle an Earth predator?" "Dr. Vex High is very skilled," Zexarth said diplomatically, "and she is aware of Earth creatures' reputation." Riley had a feeling that was going to be a theme for the evening. The plan they worked out was relatively simple. Riley would attend the event as an invited guest, gather evidence of the illegal activities, and signal for backup when he was ready to move. The security team would surround the facility and move in on his signal. Dr. Vex High would be standing by to handle any injured animals. It was a good plan, Riley thought. It was also probably going to go horribly wrong, because that was how these things usually worked out. The evening of the special event, Riley found himself back in the outer ring, this time dressed in the most expensive clothing he could find in the station's shops. The invitation Scrix had provided specified formal attire, which in the context of a galactic community meant something that looked respectable regardless of your species' anatomy. The entrance to the converted cargo bay was busier than it had been the night before, with beings from dozens of different species arriving for the event. Riley recognized several faces from the station's more upscale districts. Apparently, illegal blood sports had a surprisingly broad appeal among the wealthy. The security droid at the entrance seemed to recognize him from the previous night, and waved him through without question. Inside, the arena had been transformed for the special event. The lighting was more dramatic, the seating had been expanded, and there were servers circulating with drinks, and what Riley assumed were expensive hors d'oeuvres. "Mr. Riley!" Scrix appeared at his elbow, practically vibrating with excitement. "Welcome to our most exclusive event. You are in for a truly spectacular evening." "I'm looking forward to it," Riley said, accepting a drink that smelled like industrial solvent and tasted worse. "When do we get to see the Earth predator?" "Patience," Scrix said, guiding him to a prime seat in the VIP section. "We have several preliminary matches first. Building anticipation, you understand." Riley settled into his seat and watched as the crowd continued to arrive. He estimated there were at least 300 beings present, all of whom seemed to have paid considerable sums for the privilege of watching what was probably going to be animal cruelty on a massive scale. The preliminary matches were much like what he'd seen the night before. Various non-sentient creatures fighting to the death while the crowd cheered and placed bets. Riley found himself studying the faces around him, memorizing details that might be useful for the inevitable prosecutions. "Enjoying the show?" asked a voice to his right. Riley turned to see a being that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a businessman. It was wearing what appeared to be a very expensive suit and had the general air of someone who was used to being important. "It's certainly educational," Riley replied. "Indeed," the being said, extending what might have been a hand. "I am Counselor Threxwyn, representing the hegemony of Cathara, and you are the human I have heard so much about." Riley shook the offered appendage. "Word travels fast." "Oh, my dear fellow," Threxwyn said with obvious amusement. You are quite the celebrity. A human attending one of these events. Well, it has generated considerable interest. I'm just here for the entertainment. Of course, Threxwin agreed. But surely you appreciate the historical significance of tonight's main event. Riley raised an eyebrow. Historical significance? A Earth predator facing off against the finest specimens from other worlds, Threxwin explained. It will be a test of your species' reputation. Are Earth creatures truly as formidable as the stories suggest? Riley felt his stomach drop. You're talking about using the Earth predator in a fight? Naturally, Threxwin said, apparently surprised by the question. That is the entire point of the exercise. We have arranged for it to face a Vorthak battle beast, one of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. It should be quite illuminating. Riley tried to keep his expression neutral, but internally he was horrified. Whatever Earth creature they had captured, it was about to be thrown into a fight against something specifically bred for combat. It was going to be slaughter. When does the main event begin? He asked. Soon, Threxwin said. In fact, I believe they are preparing the arena now. Riley looked down at the pit and saw that the handlers were indeed making preparations. They were installing what appeared to be additional safety barriers around the arena, and he could see medical teams standing by. Whatever they were planning, they were taking it seriously. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all descriptions, Scrix's voice echoed through the arena. Welcome to tonight's main event. For the first time in galactic history, we present a creature from the legendary death world of Earth, facing off against a champion from the combat arenas of Vorthak Prime. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Riley felt his heart racing. This was it, the moment when he would find out what Earth predator they had captured, and when he would have to decide whether to blow his cover to try to save it. A gate opened on one side of the arena, and handlers began leading out the Vorthak battle beast. Riley had seen pictures of these creatures in xenobiology textbooks. They were about the size of a small elephant, covered in armored plates, and equipped with claws that could tear through steel. This particular specimen looked like it had been bred specifically for combat, with scars crisscrossing its hide, and a general air of barely contained violence. And now, Scrix announced, the moment you have all been waiting for. Direct from the third planet of the Sol System, we present the Earth Predator. A second gate opened, and Riley held his breath as he waited to see what would emerge. What came out was not what he expected. It was a human. Not just any human. It was a woman in her 30s, athletic build, wearing what appeared to be improvised armor made from scavenged materials. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face was streaked with dirt and what might have been blood, and her eyes held the kind of wild desperation that Riley had seen in cornered animals. The crowd was absolutely silent for a moment, as if they couldn't quite process what they were seeing. Then Threxwin leaned over and whispered, Magnificent, is it not? The ultimate predator from the death world of Earth. This should be quite the contest. Riley stared at the woman in the arena, his mind racing. They hadn't captured an Earth predator, they had captured a human, and now they were expecting her to fight a creature that could tear her apart without breaking a sweat. This is insane, Riley said, standing up. You can't make a human fight that thing. Make? Threxwin looked genuinely puzzled. My dear fellow, we are not making her do anything. She volunteered. She what? The human volunteered, Threxwin repeated. When we explained the situation to her, she immediately agreed to participate. Quite eager, actually. Riley looked back at the arena, where the woman was studying the battle beast with the calm assessment of a professional. She wasn't panicking, wasn't trying to escape, wasn't even looking particularly worried. She was evaluating her opponent. What situation? Riley asked. Well, Threxwin said. She was originally scheduled to be executed for various crimes against the hegemony. But when we learned of her species and planet of origin, we thought it might be more educational to test her against a worthy opponent. So you gave her a choice between execution and fighting a battle beast? We gave her the opportunity to prove her species' reputation, Threxwin corrected. She seemed quite honored by the chance. Riley watched as the woman in the arena finished her assessment and began moving toward the battle beast. Her movements were fluid, controlled, and utterly fearless. She looked like someone who had been in fights before, serious fights, where the stakes were life and death. What crimes? Riley asked. Oh, the usual, Threxwin said dismissively. Smuggling, fraud, assault, theft. She was quite the troublemaker. But now she has the chance to redeem herself by representing her species in honorable combat. The battle beast had noticed the human and was beginning to circle her, its massive head lowered in what Riley recognized as a threat display. The woman matched its movement, staying just out of range of its claws while studying its gait and posture. This is murder, Riley said. This is natural selection, Threxwin replied. If humans are truly the apex predators of their world, she should be able to handle one battle beast. If not, well, perhaps your species' reputation is somewhat exaggerated. Riley looked around the arena and saw that every being present was watching the fight with rapt attention. This wasn't just entertainment for them. It was a test of humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. If the woman in the arena lost, it would be seen as proof that humans weren't as dangerous as everyone thought. If she won, the battle beast made its move, lunging forward with surprising speed for something its size. The woman didn't try to dodge. Instead, she moved directly toward the creature, sliding under its reaching claws and rolling to the side as it passed. It was a move that required perfect timing and absolute fearlessness. Riley had seen similar techniques used by matadors, but this was no bull. This was a creature specifically bred to kill. The battle beast spun around, confused by the human's unexpected response. It had probably fought dozens of opponents, but none of them had ever charged directly at it. The woman was already moving again, staying close to the creature's side where its claws couldn't reach her. Fascinating, Threxwin murmured. She is using the creature's size against it. The battle beast tried to snap at the woman with its massive jaws, but she was too quick, rolling away just before the teeth could close on her. The crowd was beginning to murmur with excitement. This wasn't going the way they had expected. Riley found himself leaning forward, caught up in the spectacle despite himself. The woman in the arena was demonstrating exactly the kind of tactical thinking and persistence that had made humans feared throughout the galaxy. She wasn't trying to overpower the battle beast. She was wearing it down, frustrating it, making it work harder than it was used to. The battle beast was becoming more aggressive, its attacks more frantic. It wasn't used to prey that fought back so effectively, and its frustration was evident in the way it was lashing out almost randomly. The woman, meanwhile, seemed to be getting calmer and more focused. She was studying the creature's movements, learning its patterns, finding its weaknesses. Riley realized that she was hunting it, even though she was supposed to be the prey. This is remarkable, Threxwin said. I had heard that humans were persistence predators, but to see it in action. The battle beast made another lunging attack, and this time the woman was ready. Instead of dodging, she grabbed onto one of the creature's armored plates and used its own momentum to swing herself onto its back. The crowd gasped as she wrapped her arms around the creature's massive neck. She's going to try to choke it out, Riley realized. With her bare hands? Threxwin sounded incredulous. The battle beast was thrashing wildly now, trying to dislodge the human from its back. But she held on with grim determination, her arms locked around its throat in what Riley recognized as a professional chokehold. The crowd was on its feet now, cheering and shouting. Riley could hear bets being placed and revised as the odds shifted in real time. The battle beast's movements were becoming more sluggish as the chokehold took effect. It was a creature built for short, violent encounters, not for prolonged struggles. The woman, meanwhile, showed no signs of fatigue. She was built for this kind of endurance contest. Incredible, Threxwin breathed. She is actually winning. The battle beast staggered, its massive legs beginning to buckle. The woman maintained her grip, her face set in an expression of absolute concentration. She looked like someone who had done this before, someone who understood exactly what she was doing. Finally, the battle beast collapsed, its breathing labored but regular. The woman released her grip and rolled away, ready to continue the fight if necessary. But the creature was finished, not dead but thoroughly defeated. The arena was silent for a moment, as if the crowd couldn't quite believe what they had just witnessed. Then the cheering began, a sound that seemed to shake the entire converted cargo bay. Magnificent! Threxwin was practically shouting. Absolutely magnificent! The human has proven her species' reputation beyond any doubt. Riley watched as the woman in the arena raised her arms in victory, and he realized that she had just done something that would reverberate throughout the galaxy. She had faced down one of the most dangerous creatures in known space and defeated it with nothing but her bare hands and her intelligence. She had proven that humans were everything the stories said they were. But she had also just put herself in serious danger, because now every being in the galaxy would know that the stories were true. This changes everything, Threxwin said, his voice filled with awe. The implications are staggering, if humans can do this. Riley was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward the arena floor. He needed to get to the woman before someone decided that a human who could defeat a battle beast was too dangerous to be allowed to live. He activated his communicator as he moved. This is Connor. Move in now. All units, move in now. Confirmed, came the reply. We are moving. Riley reached the edge of the arena just as the woman looked up and saw him. Their eyes met across the pit, and he saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. She wasn't surprised to see him. She had been expecting him, You're the human detective, she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the arena. I was wondering when you'd show up. We need to get you out of here, Riley called back. This place is about to be swarmed by security. The woman smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. I don't think so, she said. I think I'm exactly where I need to be. That's when Riley realized that this whole thing had been a setup. The woman in the arena wasn't a victim. She was a player in a much larger game. And he had just walked into the middle of it. The lights in the arena suddenly dimmed, and Riley heard the unmistakable sound of weapons being powered up. Around him, the crowd was beginning to panic as they realized that something was very wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman in the arena announced, her voice somehow carrying over the chaos. I'm afraid tonight's entertainment isn't over yet. That's when the shooting started. The next few minutes were what Riley would later describe as aggressively educational. It turned out that the woman in the arena, who introduced herself as Captain Elena Rodriguez, late of the Terran Colonial Marines, had been working undercover for the past 6 months to infiltrate the Beltarian Syndicate's operations. The execution she had supposedly been facing was actually an elaborate cover story designed to get her into the illegal fighting ring. The Battle Beast fight had been her way of proving her credentials and gaining the trust of the Syndicate's leadership. And the weapons fire that had erupted during the confusion was courtesy of her backup team, who had been waiting in the station's ventilation system for her signal. Riley found himself crouched behind an overturned table with Threxwin, who was having what appeared to be an existential crisis about the nature of human tactical thinking. This was all planned, Threxwin kept repeating. The human planned all of this. She allowed herself to be captured, participated in illegal combat, and used it as cover for a military operation. That's actually pretty impressive, Riley admitted, ducking as another burst of energy fire passed overhead. Impressive? Threxwin stared at him with his compound eyes. She defeated a battle beast with her bare hands as part of an elaborate deception. Do you understand the implications of this? Riley was starting to, actually. If word of this got out, and it would, because there were 300 witnesses, it would reinforce humanity's reputation as galaxy-class strategic thinkers. The story would become legend. The human who allowed herself to be captured, fought a battle beast to maintain her cover, and then used the chaos to take down an entire criminal organization. She's going to be famous, Riley realized. She's going to be terrifying, Threxwin corrected. Every species in the galaxy is going to hear this story and think, what else are humans capable of? The fighting was winding down now, and Riley could see uniformed figures moving through the arena, securing the area and processing the syndicate members who had been caught in the operation. Captain Rodriguez was giving orders to her team, and Riley noticed that even the Colonial Marines seemed to treat her with considerable respect. Detective Connor? She called out as she approached their hiding spot. Thanks for the backup call. Your security team provided excellent support. Riley stood up, brushing debris from his clothes. I'm not sure how much help we actually were. Looks like you had everything well in hand. We did, Rodriguez confirmed. But having local law enforcement involved makes the legal proceedings much smoother. We'll be able to prosecute the syndicate members under both galactic and local law. How long have you been planning this operation? About a year, Rodriguez said. The Beltarian Syndicate has been trafficking in endangered species from dozens of worlds. We've been trying to find a way to get close to their leadership for months. And you decided to use humanity's reputation as a weapon? Rodriguez smiled, and Riley realized that she had probably been looking forward to this conversation. Detective, do you know what the most effective tool in any military arsenal is? Superior firepower? Psychological warfare, Rodriguez corrected. The ability to make your enemies so afraid of you that they defeat themselves. Humans have been handed the perfect psychological weapon, our reputation as unstoppable predators. It would be wasteful not to use it. Riley looked around the arena where the cleanup was continuing. And tonight's performance was designed to reinforce that reputation? Tonight's performance was designed to send a message, Rodriguez said. Not just to the Syndicate, but to every criminal organization in the galaxy. The message is simple. Humans are watching, and we are more dangerous than you think. Threxwin, who had been listening to this conversation with growing horror, finally spoke up. You are weaponizing your own reputation. We're managing our brand, Rodriguez replied diplomatically. It's a valuable asset. Riley had to admit it was effective. The story of tonight's events would spread throughout the galaxy within days, and it would reinforce every stereotype about human tactical thinking and persistence. Criminal organizations would think twice before operating in human space, and legitimate governments would be even more careful about antagonizing the Terran Federation. There is one thing I'm curious about, Riley said. How did you know I was here? We've been monitoring station security communications, Rodriguez explained. When we heard that a human detective was investigating illegal gambling operations, we knew it was only a matter of time before you stumbled onto our operation. So you were prepared for me to show up? We were prepared for several scenarios, Rodriguez said. The plan was flexible enough to accommodate local law enforcement involvement. Riley nodded, though he wasn't sure how he felt about being treated as a predictable variable in someone else's operation. Well, I'm glad it worked out. It worked out perfectly, Rodriguez agreed. The syndicate is dismantled, their leadership is in custody, and the story of tonight's events will serve as a deterrent to similar operations throughout the galaxy. As the cleanup continued around them, Riley found himself thinking about the larger implications of what had just happened. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for less than a decade, but they were already wielding their reputation as a strategic asset. It was, he had to admit, a very human thing to do. The debriefing took place 2 days later in Zixarth's office, with Captain Rodriguez participating via hologram from her ship. Riley sat in the uncomfortable chair and listened as the administrator went through the official report. The Beltarian Syndicate's operations have been completely dismantled, Zixarth reported. 43 individuals have been arrested, including the organization's leadership. The illegal wildlife trafficking network they operated has been shut down, and the surviving animals have been returned to their home worlds. What about the legal proceedings? Riley asked. The syndicate members will face trial under both galactic and local law, Rodriguez said from her hologram. The evidence we gathered during the operation is more than sufficient for conviction. And the publicity? Zixarth's head tilted in what Riley had learned was his equivalent of a grimace. The story has spread throughout the galaxy with remarkable speed. The human who defeated a battle beast to infiltrate a criminal organization has become something of a legend. How are other species reacting? With considerable interest, Zixarth said diplomatically. There have been numerous requests for information about human tactical capabilities, and several governments have inquired about hiring human consultants for their own law enforcement operations. Riley looked at Rodriguez's hologram. Congratulations, you've successfully terrified the entire galaxy. That was the general idea, Rodriguez replied. Fear is an excellent deterrent to crime. It's also an excellent way to make enemies, Riley pointed out. Only if you're planning to break the law, Rodriguez said. For everyone else, having humans as allies is suddenly looking very attractive. Riley had to admit she had a point. Several species had already approached the Terran Federation about mutual defense agreements, and trade inquiries were pouring in from across the galaxy. Humanity's reputation as dangerous predators was being balanced by their reputation as valuable allies. There is one other matter, Zixarth said. The Galactic Council has requested that Earth provide a representative to discuss humanity's role in galactic law enforcement. They want to officially recognize humans as the galaxy's police force, Riley asked. They want to discuss the possibility of establishing a formal relationship, Zixarth corrected. With appropriate safeguards and oversight, of course. Rodriguez's hologram smiled. I think they're beginning to realize that having humans on their side is preferable to having humans as opponents. Riley finished his coffee and stood up. Well, it's been an educational few days. I think I've learned more about humanity's place in the galaxy than I ever wanted to know. And what have you learned? Rodriguez asked. Riley thought about it for a moment. That sometimes the most effective weapon is the one you never have to use. And that reputation, once established, can be more powerful than any actual force. Very good, Detective, Rodriguez said. You're beginning to think like a human. As Riley left the administrator's office, he found himself thinking about the future. Humanity had been handed a unique opportunity, the chance to shape their role in the galactic community through careful management of their reputation. They could be the galaxy's peacekeepers, the species that criminals feared and law-abiding citizens respected. It was a heavy responsibility, but Riley had to admit, it was also kind of exciting. After all, they were human, and as everyone in the galaxy was learning, humans were very good at rising to meet challenges, even the ones they created for themselves. Epilogue. 6 months later, Riley was sitting in his favorite spot in the main promenade, watching the usual chaos and sipping his terrible coffee. The station had returned to normal operations, though there were subtle changes that reminded him of the events that had transpired. The illegal gambling operation had been replaced by a legitimate sports complex, complete with proper licensing and safety protocols. The outer ring had been cleaned up considerably, with several new businesses opening to serve the influx of visitors who came to Kepler Station specifically because it was known as a place where humans maintained order. Riley had been promoted to Chief of Station Security, a position that came with better quarters, a bigger budget, and the unofficial title of the human who keeps the peace. He'd discovered that his reputation as a persistence predator made most of his job considerably easier. Few beings were willing to cause trouble when they knew a human was watching.